We are live. Welcome to the MLB Strategy Show. It is Tuesday, August 9th. I am Josh Engleman. I'm joined by Adam Scherer, and we are brought to you by Prize Picks. Whew. I almost didn't say Prize Picks. I almost went with Odd Shopper, which wouldn't have been as bad. That's not an actual competitor, so I would have been okay with it. Either way, 14-game MLB slate to break down today. So hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live, and pour one out for Sean V, thinking Starling Marte wasn't a good cash play yesterday. Immediately homers to start off the slate. Couldn't have been any better for someone with such an awful, awful take, as if that's how cash plays work. Adam, how was your night? How are you?
I'm good. It was fine. I was winning the big tournament for a while. Had a lot of Baltimore. They fell off a little bit, so ended up pretty much breaking even. But yeah, it was fine.
Yeah, I had a lot of the Blue Jays, the Mets, and the Cubs. I did not almost break even. The two teams that I took a stand on ended up finishing 1-0 and I believe 1-0. So that didn't help either. Just a terrible Monday. Glad it's gone. 14 games, man. Lots to look at. And we've got another one of those. There's one team way, way, way better than the other slates. Cardinals in cores today. It is going to be a real chore to get away from them, at least based on everything that I've looked at so far. But we'll dive into that in a little bit. We got a ton to talk about. I'm ready to just start if you are.
Yeah, I'm getting there. So
okay, well, I'll keep mumbling a little bit. Last night's slate I didn't enjoy. Go watch the Process Show. Broke down the PGA contests for this week. They've bumped up a couple of the prize pools that we had last week now that we're getting into golf playoffs. So if you're interested in golf, now's a great time to do it, at least for this week. It's not a great time in the grand scheme of things because this season ends in 3 weeks, but should be good. Did you expect Jose Suarez to be the best pitcher on the slate last night?
No, I did not. I thought he was playable, obviously, but sure. Certainly didn't. I said within that game I preferred Irvin if I had to go to one of the two.
Yeah, I woke up and saw that one. I was just like, oh, that's not ideal. Yeah. Snell was a whisker away from having a real problem and being out of there in 4. Had them loaded in the 4th. Ended up getting out of it. Went way deeper in the game than I was ever expecting him to go. And then obviously Bassett, even though he was getting singled to death, just efficiently ripping through a garbage Cincinnati Reds team.
Yeah, he had looked like he was going to just fly backwards in like the 3rd or the 4th inning, but then got out of it and just kept going.
Yeah, same thing happened then for Snell, and I was just like, one single, and Snell's probably like, there's a decent chance he doesn't throw the 5th just because of the way that he operates.
Right.
Once he got out of it, then I think he ended up going like 6 1/3 or something, threw over 100 pitches.
Good for Snell. But yeah, I'm good to go now. So
Perfect. Well, then I am also good to go. Let's do this. Actually, let me go ahead and refresh this table. Okay, that's the flattest pitching exposures I've had in a very long time. What's not flat, however, are the exposures to the Cardinals. So we'll get there when we get there. Orioles and Blue Jays. 3.8 run implied total for the Orioles. 4.8 for the Blue Jays. Kyle Bradish and Alek Manoah. No ownership going to Bradish. And unless I'm blind here, no ownership going to Manoah. I can't. We're going to have to rerun the ownership before we keep going here. He shouldn't be 1% owned today.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why he would be getting less than Ohtani, Wheeler, Cole, Bieber. 1% at 8,900 seems incorrect.
I have 20% right now. I would happily take 20% on one. That's not a sim result. That's like an actual crunch result for me.
But I mean, we also have Morton getting 1%. That seems low. Maybe it is just kind of that sort of slate.
I don't think so. I mean, I just don't think so. we'll get to it. But there's one of these teams doesn't have a starter in our ownership percentages, and that's usually a sign that something's broken.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just even looking at projections, we have Manoah 7 points behind Ohtani, 5 to 6 points behind Cole, Cole and Wheeler, 3.5 behind Bieber.
Okay, well then let's break this down then. Talk to me about Manoah, because at least on the surface to me, he stands out more than an unowned pitcher.
Right, and I agree with that. I do think it ends up being higher than 1%. I'm more just saying, I don't think that this is a slate where Manoah is popular. I think
No. I don't think that exists today. I've got 8 guys all between 15 and 25%. There's a lot of pitching talent out there today.
But yeah, I mean, it is a decent spot for Manoah. He's a pretty good pitcher, about a 22.5, on the wrong date. I think he's got about a 23% strikeout percentage this year. Decent spot against the Orioles. We know that they basically have 5 good hitters in their lineup, 6 if you want to include Urias. Overall this year, 22.5% strikeout percentage, 3.91 xFIP for Manoah. So, I think he's a good pitcher, but I also just don't think he really stands out on this particular slate.
He'll stand out on this slate if his ownership remains where it is. Otherwise, I do think that he just there are a lot of guys in and around there. Carrasco's at 21% ownership. We'll talk about him in a little bit. I would rather get to Manoah at no ownership than Carrasco at 20. Guys like Stroman and Urquidy pulling a little bit of ownership that I would rather just reappropriate to Alek Manoah. Ownership's going to be tough. There's just a lot of really high-end pitching arms today. From the top of the list of Cole all through the 9s, even basically all through the 8s. I'm not a big Martin Perez guy, but there's a lot out there that we could talk about. There's no way we could talk about Kyle.
There's a lot of good pitching and then a lot of really bad pitching.
Yeah. Yeah. The bottom is really bad. Really bad. We don't have to talk about Bradish, right?
Not in this spot on this slate. I don't think so. He's had decent strikeout stuff this year, striking out 22.8% of hitters, 3.88 xFIP is solid. He has had home run issues, but the big thing is just, you're facing the Blue Jays on a 14-game slate with a ton of good pitching.
Let's talk about those Blue Jays. 3rd in aggregate ownership, 4th in our top stack tool. That is basically just all, for the most part, all going to Kirk. He's 16% owned. Everybody else is in single digits. I mean, it's the Blue Jays, so I'm happy to get a stack of them. They're not the most efficient stack in the world, but I don't think it matters all that much. I'd like to get to Toronto. I have some, but I am, as of right now, under the field.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very high upside spot. I mentioned that Bradish has had good strikeout stuff, and he has a solid xFIP, but he has allowed 1.9 home runs per 9 this year. Against righties, a 256 actual ISO, 245 expected ISO, 397 expected WOBA. He's been pretty strongly reverse splits this year. 26.7% strikeout percentage to lefties compared to 20.1% to righties. 109 expected ISO to lefties, 304 expected WOBA compared to the 245 and 397 expected ISO and expected WOBA to righties. And looking at the pitches he throws, he does have a changeup that he throws 18% of the time to lefties that has a 16% swinging strike percentage. So that can help explain sort of why he's had more issues with right-handed hitters. But when you apply that to Toronto, I mean, this is just a lineup full of right-handed power hitters. The park doesn't help right-handed power at all, but still just a really high upside spot for the Blue Jays.
I guess Kirk is probably in the cash considerations, depending on what you fill out of the Rockies and Cardinals, but at least on a catcher short list for cash.
Yeah, agreed.
But I assume Coors Field's going to make up quite a large bit of this. Any justification for going to your Orioles today against Manoah? Seems like a tough sell.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty tough sell just given the size of the slate. There's plenty of power in this lineup, but Manoah, sub 100 expected ISO to righties this year, 145 to lefties. Just not a spot that really stands out to target. And you also don't have, I mean, you do have cheap bats after the top three, but Mullins, Rutschman, Santander are all relatively expensive. Then it drops off to, Mountcastle, Hayes, Terran Vavra, 2K flat, but I don't think they're really going to stand out on the slate.
Anything else here?
Nope.
All righty. Phillies and Marlins, 4.5 run implied total for the Phillies, 3 for the Marlins. Zach Wheeler and Braxton Garrett. Wheeler is 10,400, second most expensive pitcher on the slate, behind $100 behind Garrett Cole. Braxton Garrett on the opposite side, 7,500. So Wheeler's 20% owned. I think that makes some sense. Obviously, targeting against the Marlins looks good. I don't really like this Marlins lineup today. There are some strikeouts here for sure. I think I'm more interested in Braxton Garrett against the Phillies at 7,500 as a value arm.
More than Wheeler?
In the sense that I think there are a lot less options around Braxton Garrett than like there are plenty of different versions of Zach Wheeler today.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with that, but I also assume I'm just going to be playing a lot of two pitchers that are better than Braxton Garrett. But he does have some talent. I mean, he's striking out where. Oh, yeah. So he's striking out 27% of hitters this year, 3.17 xFIP. It is a negative park shift for him going into Philly, and there is plenty of right-handed power in this lineup. But I agree that there is upside for him. He still has a 25% strikeout percentage against righties, only a 139 expected ISO. I doubt I get to that much just because there is so much opportunity cost to pitcher though.
Yeah. Yeah, with Garrett having no ownership, the Phillies projected lineup that I have in is bad. Aggregate WRC plus of 103.
So above average?
Well, that's terrible for the slate. Average for today's slate is 106.
Okay.
So like above average in the considering 100 to be average, yes. In relationship to the rest of the slate, no.
Yes.
The bottom four guys in the lineup, Stott, Marsh, Stubbs, and Nick Maton, all under 100. I think
that's a different lineup than I have projected for what it's worth.
Okay.
Not sure how much it matters, but Vierling, Segura, Sosa, Stott.
Interesting. Yeah, we're a very different lineup there. If the lineup that I have in right now for the Phillies is the lineup with a 25% K rate and a 103 WRC plus, like that's why Braxton Garrett is standing out to me.
So I mean, you're just projecting Real Muto not to play?
In this particular lineup, yes.
Okay. I don't think that's correct because he sat Sunday.
Okay. I wonder why it is then.
Probably just rerunning what they did on Sunday.
Let's see if this was just a last night thing.
Because they didn't play last night. So
when I pulled this. Because I'll pull everything again then if that's the case. If he's still out, then I'm going to try to dig in to see if there's a reason. Yeah, he's back. Okay, so he's back in it then. I'm going to rerun everything while I'm talking. Either way, I don't think we should probably put it like Wheeler into any context yet. We have so many other guys in and around Wheeler that we'll try to separate them all out as we get to the end of that list. Once we get through Cole, Wheeler, Ohtani, Peralta to a degree, although it's going to be hard with his depth, Musgrove, Bieber. Like once we get through that group, we'll start to try to sift this out. Let's talk about the Phillies bats then. 4th in aggregate ownership, 9th in our top stack tool. Is this the most over-owned team?
It kind of looks that way right now. I mean, I think it's a good park. It looks like it's supposed to be like 90 degrees, so pretty good hitting weather. But Garrett has been good this year, and there's just so many bad pitchers on this slate that I don't necessarily think I'm going to be targeting Garrett a lot. That being said, though, there is value here. Like Rhys Hoskins is only 4,400. Alec Boehm is only 4,100. Castellanos is only 3,800. Matt Vierling, if he's in the lineup, is 2,100. So it is a team. I mean, they have a 4.6 implied run total. They're in Philly. They do offer some value. So I understand why they're getting some ownership, but I do think they're getting a little bit more than they probably deserve right now.
King of Smack says, to be honest, you could actually pay down at pitcher and get some sluggers in. This is like the best pay up day of the year.
I mean, you can pay down at pitcher. That's a thing. It's a choice you could make.
Of course. I can't imagine looking at today's pitching slate and thinking, pay down's probably the path that I want to take. Meanwhile, we're like, yo, the bottom of pitching looks like shit.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to be pretty difficult because the thing is, not only are there a lot of just really, really good pitchers on this slate, so you're giving up quite a bit if you just ignore that entire range, but whenever there's 14 games, there's just going to be enough value bats that you can get to those pitchers relatively easily.
Right. Okay. I'm pasting in my updated lineups, so we're good there. Is there anything here for you for the Marlins? This seems like one of the easier decision points you'll make today.
Yeah, I don't really have anything here. I mean, they're cheap. They're in a good park, but I think you can probably do better than targeting Zach Wheeler here.
Yeah. That's going to be the really easy. Like, there's going to be 8, 9, 10 teams that we basically just cross off immediately because of how good the pitching is.
Right.
So I have nothing else here. And it doesn't look like any Phillies bats are going to be making their way into any sort of cash builds. Do you see anything different to that?
I mean,
other than like, if you got to Schwarber.
Well, I was thinking like Hoskins and Castellanos are probably at least on the board.
Okay. That works. Mets and Reds. Definitely going to talk here. 5.4 run implied total for the Mets. 3.2 for the Reds. Carlos Carrasco and Mike Minor. No ownership going to Minor. Carrasco coming in 21% owned at 8,200. You're not going to find many matchups better than this one.
Yeah, it looks good for Carrasco, and the price tag's really reasonable as well. Cheap enough where, I mean, like if you pair him with one of the 10K guys, you're still only paying 18 to 19K at the position. So you're still going to have around 4K to use on average per position for hitters. So it looks like a really good spot. Good matchup, like you said. The Reds traded away a couple of their better hitters, in particular Brandon Drury. 23.3% strikeout percentage for Carrasco, 3.5 xFIP. It just all sets up really well for him.
It really does. The ownership, I assume, doesn't really matter to you at this case because he's 8,200 and he's facing the Reds. Like, it's obviously warranted.
Right. I mean, yeah, like it matters, but at 20%, I'm not overly concerned about it, especially because he's cheap as well. Like, there's not really anybody. I mean, so like looking in that price range, Carrasco at 8,200, Charlie Morton at 8,500 against Boston, I think is a solid pivot if he's not going to get any ownership. I do think that ownership probably comes up at least a bit. But outside of that, like even Manoah is 10% more expensive, basically. So there's not a whole lot else around Carrasco that I would expect to get to. It's not like when you have Ohtani, Wheeler, and Cole all sitting there and they're all, functionally the same play.
Jesus Christ. I'm getting dragged for pitching Garrett and then saying that there were no paydown options. There's 13 guys below him in salary. He's not the paydown option.
Yeah, I mean, you also were talking. I mean, it was pretty clear that when you said you liked Garrett, you also had the Phillies like AAA lineup in your projections.
Also very correct. Like, I mean, if we're talking about paydown options, there are 13 guys priced below Braxton Garrett. If Braxton Garrett's the paydown, I don't know what the hell we're calling the rest of those guys.
Right.
I know we're not going to talk about Mike Minor. We're definitely going to talk about the Mets. 5.4 run implied total is, at least as of right now, the second highest implied total on the slate. The first non-cores edition. I don't have much of an issue going up against Mike Minor, so give me quite a bit of this Mets team if I can.
Yeah, not a lot of ownership coming in either. I think one reason is the pricing. You have a pretty expensive team. Pete Alonso, 5,900. I would love to get there if I can, but you also have pitching that you want to get to. If Darren Ruff is in the lineup, he's 3K flat, first base and outfield eligible. Decent chance, I would think, that he ends up getting pinch hit for later in the game, but still plenty of power there. Minor's given it up to righties this year with a 261 expected ISO, only an 18.5% strikeout percentage. So more than happy to get to the Mets. Marte, Lindor, Escobar all look good as well. Mark Canha's only 3,500. I do think they're going a little bit under owned. It's just a matter of, can you find the value to make those lineups work?
Ruff looks at that 13% ownership on Ruff. Probably not a guy that you're going to end up getting to in a cash game today, but certainly viable at that salary. I think that we're just going to see better power options at some point in time. No justification for the Reds, correct?
Correct. And also, Miles Michaelis, Marcus Stroman, Jose Urquidy should never be mentioned in the same sentence as saying they're in the same tier as Zach Wheeler.
Where did that happen?
King of Smack said Michaelis, Stroman, Urquidy, Carrasco are all very good options. They could definitely be in the same tier as Wheeler and the others that are top dollar. No, they're perfectly fine plays at their prices. They're not anywhere close to the same tier as Wheeler and Cole and Ohtani.
Nope. But, I mean, that's King of Smack for you.
Like,
obviously going to be a bad take.
these are a bunch of guys that strike out 30+% of hitters compared to guys that strike out like 20 to 23. It's just not the same.
No, it's not. Not even close. Yeah, I can't even mention Reds bats. Don't do that. I will mention Reds bats. What do you think of our number 2 value stack, the Cincinnati Reds?
So they've just basically replaced the Tigers from earlier in the year as always the top value stack or one of the top value stacks, but also one of the least likely to succeed.
It's brutal. I got nothing else here.
No, I mean, if you wanted to point to a weakness Carrasco has had this year, he has allowed a 193 expected ISO to lefties. Moustakas is 2,300. Votto's 3,600. Do with that what you will. For me, it's probably nothing.
Yeah. I hope it's nothing. One-off Moustakas, fine. Red stack, not for me. Schedule for the rest of the day, folks. At 12 p.m., we're going to have Nick Lepre doing a Drafters live draft. At 1 p.m., we'll have the PGA Strategy Show for the FedEx St. Jude. 4:45, Adam and I will be back for the deeper dive, going an hour 15 to break this bad boy down. And then MLB Live before lock again at 6 p.m. I assume that's Greg and Eric. Top Stacks tool in baseball, that is free for today. PGA rankings also free, so you get 2 pieces of free content. It's just a good day all around at Stokastic.com. On to Tigers and Guardians. 3.1 run implied total for the Tigers, 4.2 for the Guardians. Tyler Alexander and Shane Bieber. Another start where we're going to put a line directly through Tyler Alexander's name, and then we're going to talk about Shane Bieber, who is 9,400 and 24% owned. No real craziness to me. Decent matchup against the Detroit Tigers.
Yeah, not bad. And, he's getting strikeouts again. He had kind of started off slowly this year, but he's up to a 25% strikeout percentage, 3.13 xFIP. I think a lot of the talk of him being kind of, still washed isn't the right word, but, being not very good or not nearly as good as he was kind of overstated. And you're seeing that now. So a good matchup for him, still a good price tag at 9,400. You do get, a little bit of a price break as well, which I think is warranted, given that Ohtani, Wheeler, Cole all do have substantially higher strikeout percentages than Bieber. Getting that $1,000 discount does just kind of put him right back into play with those guys. And then the matchup certainly helps as well.
Let's go ahead and skip talking about Tyler Alexander. We'll go directly to Guardians bats. 11th in top stack, 7th in ownership. We know the Jose Ramirez cash game type discussion, but does Cleveland stand out to you? Because I don't really like them all that much.
I think they're kind of middle of the road. Right now we have them with a 3% chance of being the top stack, 5% projected ownership. I assume most of that is just Ramirez pulling it up because he's always going to be a top third base option. But yeah, I mean, Alexander isn't particularly good, but he's also not likely to go very deep into this game. And then you're likely just to get a bunch of bullpen arms thrown at you. So Ramirez looks good. Ahmed Rosario looks fine. Oscar Gonzalez is only 3K. That's probably the best value bat in this lineup. But as a whole, I just don't anticipate getting to a substantial amount of Cleveland.
Do you anticipate getting to a substantial amount of the Detroit Tigers today?
Weirdly, I don't. As surprising as that probably is.
I expected you to tell me something different there. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. I just color me shocked. Just didn't see it coming at all. On my new crunch, Braxton Garrett down to 4% now that I have the actual major league players for the Phillies in their lineup. Certainly helps. Yeah, I got nothing else here. Tigers are unowned, and they should be.
Agreed.
Red Sox and Braves, 4.3 run implied total for the Red Sox, 5.2 for the Braves. It's Dick Mountain going for Boston. By the way, I don't know, did you see the news right before we went live? Chris Sale done for the year?
Yeah, bike accident.
Charlie Morton going for the Braves. No ownership to Hill, no ownership to Morton. I probably think that Morton should be a little bit more than 0, but definitely a tough spot here against Boston. Runs are plentiful in this park as well. Do you like Morton against Boston?
I like him at that ownership. I think this is one spot where you can differentiate a pitcher without sacrificing upside. Charlie Morton's got the 4th highest strikeout percentage on the slate behind Ohtani, Cole, and Peralta at 27.2%. 3.72 xFIP is solid. He has had some home run issues this year with 1.16 home runs allowed per nine. Like, I get why he's getting less ownership than other guys priced around him, but if he really is going to be extremely low owned, I like the idea of using him in tournaments. Like, there's just a difference between going to him and somebody like, you know, Michaelis or Stroman or whoever, that just don't get the same level of strikeouts. So
Yeah.
I think that he works as a tournament pivot, but again, it would just be somebody that I probably don't get tons of just because there's so many other pitchers. But like, if you look at the top pitchers tool, Carrasco, 11% chance of being top two at 8,200, pulling 21% ownership. Morton, 8.5% chance at 8,500, pulling less than 1%. Even if that gap closes a bit, it's pretty clear that like you're not talking a 2-to-1 gap between Carrasco and Morton.
Yeah. Any Rich Hill for you?
No.
As expected. Guess we need to start with Braves bats then, because it appears that the public wants to stack against Rich Hill. Second in our top stack tool, second in aggregate ownership. I am getting to the Braves. I think they look like a really nice option today. Acuna pulling the lion's share of this ownership, 23% owned. Shouldn't be all that surprised. He shouldn't be 5,100 either. The rest of the ownership isn't all that crazy for me. So sign me up for Atlanta.
Yeah, completely agree. I think there's a lot of cash plays here too, or at least potential cash plays. Rich Hill, not a great pitcher anymore. 192 expected ISO, 18% strikeout percentage so far this year to right-handed hitters, and you just have tons and tons of right-handed power in this lineup. And they're also just not really expensive. 5,100 for Acuna, like, yeah, in raw terms, that's still kind of expensive, but for Acuna, that's probably $1,000 less than he should be. Swanson sub 5K. Riley is only 5,300. Ozuna's cheap. Robbie Grossman's is min salary. It's just a team that I think you're getting a lot of upside, and you're also going to be able to build strong lineups around them. It's not like you're going to run into an issue where it's like, oh, I have to, throw in some Reds value or something to afford Atlanta.
No, bottom half of the lineup looks really easy to get to. Acuna is underpriced, and that's what's causing his ownership to be 23%. Love the idea of getting to Atlanta. I love when I get to stack what is my pseudo favorite team. Do you want to stack up Boston on the opposite side here against Morton?
Not particularly. Morton, I think, is a good pitcher. Boston's lineup is also just kind of dog shit outside of like a few guys. Devers, Bogarts, Martinez, obviously, are all guys I like to roster. Verdugo is cheap. That is basically the end of anything nice I have to say about the Red Sox hitters.
That's fair. Nothing else here for me either. So let's go Cubs and Nats. We're cruising through this. 4.6 run implied total for the Cubbies, 3.3 for the Nats. Marcus Stroman and Paolo Espino. No ownership going to Espino up against the Cubs. Stroman, on the other hand, currently projected for 15% ownership against the Nats. I don't think this is a particularly good Nats lineup. I don't know if I need 15% Stroman either.
I think it really is just going to come down to how often I need a pitcher in this price range, because Stroman is a solid enough real life pitcher. He's not a great strikeout guy, only striking out 22.5% of hitters this year, which I'm almost positive is actually higher than normal. You get a Nats lineup that doesn't strike out a lot, but also isn't very good. I think it's very fair to say Stroman is underpriced. So in lineups where, like, I don't know, maybe if I'm getting to like the Mets and the Braves or something, Stroman fits in there and he looks fine. And I do think it's important to clarify, because, we kind of had laughed at the paying down for pitchers thing. That's not to say like you can't make some lineups where you do play somebody like Stroman. The point that I was making fun of was that in no world is Stroman in the same tier as Ohtani, Cole, Wheeler, any of these guys. It's just he's underpriced for this matchup, and that's why he's going to get some ownership. But it's not like they are. You shouldn't be looking at this and saying like, oh, well, I can just go from Garrett Cole to Marcus Stroman, and I'm not really giving anything up. Like you are. But there's certainly some lineups where it's going to be worth it. If you're able to get a Marte Alonso pairing with, Austin Riley and Swanson and Acuna or something, that's a pretty good reason to consider going down to somebody like Stroman. But it's not like you should just be going in saying like, oh yeah, I'm just going to ignore the really good pitchers and play Marcus Stroman because they're the same.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to him yet, but this is one of those cases where if Stroman's 15%, I like Caprillion more, saving more money at
yeah, I mean it's the Angels, so sure.
Yeah, trust me, it's not, and in Oakland too. So like, not that I love it or anything, but I'll take the salary savings and the ownership savings. So I don't think it's all that big of a gap.
Yeah, I mean you can throw Tommy Henry in there too.
Absolutely. We're not talking about Espino, right?
No.
All right. I guess we're going to talk about bats, and that's going to be the Cubs side of this one. 8th in aggregate ownership, 12th in our top stack tool. Only Ortega in double digits, and that's because he's a $2,500 outfielder projected to hit leadoff. So that's usually just going to make you be in some lineups. How do you see the Chicago stack panning out for you?
I mean, it's a good spot for power. Weather in Wrigley looks cool again today. Looks like wind is blowing in, so not great hitting weather. Only a 7.5 total, 4.4 implied run total for the Cubs. Espino does give up plenty of power. 240 expected ISO to righties, 187 to lefties. Suzuki at 4,200 looks pretty good. Hap looks good. Wilson Contreras is always a good catcher option, but I do think the weather and the fact that it's suppressing the total here makes it so it's a little bit more difficult for me to get to the Cubs than it normally would be.
Yeah, I don't have too much interest here. They look good, not great as far as I'm concerned. I'll have some undoubtedly. Like I like the run total. I think you mentioned it. I heard you say the word weather, wind coming in.
Yeah, and like 70 degrees.
Okay. So very similar to yesterday, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I really wish we had taken our trip to Chicago this week.
I mean, I don't think we had a bad time other than the fact that most places didn't have air conditioning, which I couldn't have expected.
Well, that's 100% what I was referring to. It's been like 70 degrees in Chicago all week. It would have been perfect.
I thought it was pretty good just in general,
I mean,
other than being in buildings.
I thought Chicago was good. I was hot the entire week.
I can't really remember it because we were just in Dallas and that was undoubtedly hot. So I'm having trouble like reconciling the fact that Chicago was hot.
Yeah. Chicago was uncomfortable. Dallas was miserable.
Yes. Like I don't remember Chicago's weather while we were there any longer because I almost melted in Dallas.
I just distinctly remember losing probably like 5 pounds at 5-iron.
Which I think is way more of a 5-iron problem than a Chicago problem.
Well, right. Yeah, I just meant if it had been 70 degrees, it would have been a lot more enjoyable.
You would think. A lot of computers running down there. Maybe that's the problem. All that extra heat. I got nothing else here in this one.
Yeah, me neither.
Astros and Rangers. 4.4 run implied total for the Astros. 3.4 for the Rangers. Jose Urquidy and Martin Perez. Urquidy 12% owned at 7,100. Perez unowned at 8,700. I think both of those numbers seem about right. I can't imagine wanting to get to Perez against the Astros at that salary.
Yeah, I think it's just a really tough sell given all of the strikeout upside on the slate and the matchup. Houston doesn't strike out a lot. They're one of the best offenses in baseball. Perez only strikes out 21.6% of hitters. You can just get to guys in that price range where, Carrasco's facing Cincinnati or Morton, who has a strikeout percentage like 8 points higher than Perez, is facing Boston. I just find it very difficult to get to Perez.
Yeah. Talk to me about Urquidy, though. 10% seems about right. Like he just sort of works in that range.
Yeah, I think 10 to 12% is fine. Not great strikeout stuff for him. Only an 19% strikeout percentage, 4.35 xFIP. He hasn't been as good as Stroman this year. Between the two, I do prefer Stroman. I think the matchup against the Nats is more appealing than the one against the Rangers as well, but still only a 3.2 implied run total for Texas. Urquidy this year striking out 22.5% of lefties, doing a really good job limiting production against them. 262 expected WOBA, 134 expected ISO. Righties have given him trouble, only a 16% strikeout percentage, 384 expected WOBA, 248 expected ISO. Adolis Garcia at 4,300 looks really good as a one-off. Semien looks pretty solid. But most of the best hitters in this lineup are left-handed, so that, I guess, plays to Urquidy's strengths as well, given that he's clearly had more success against them.
If you're getting to one side of this game, is it the Astros?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't get much of the Astros. They're basically unowned, 17th in our ownership percentages. Jeremy Pena is at 4%. On the Rangers side, highest owned guy is Semien in the leadoff spot at 5%. Doesn't appear that anybody's really going to the hitting here. Do you expect to?
Probably not as a whole. I do individually think Semien looks fine, and I think Adolis Garcia looks good. On the Astros side, Perez really just hasn't given up power to righties this year, or to anybody. 109 expected ISO to righties, 112 actual ISO. It's still the Astros. You still have just so many good hitters in this lineup. Trey Mancini's still really cheap and hitting in Houston. I think he's kind of just going to be somebody you can always play when he's in Houston until that price tag comes up. But if you go here, I think it's still much more like just saying, okay, well, the Astros are really good. I'll bet on their talent here at low ownership, more so than it is saying, oh, Martin Perez does this, and this poorly, and the Astros are likely to do well.
I don't have anything else that I would want to touch on here.
Nope.
Weird slate. So, too much pitching. You know what we don't have too much of, though? Prize Picks, the presenting sponsor of this show. Use the promo code AWESEMO. You still get to type it in from time to time. AWESEMO. When you sign up to get up to a $100 first match deposit bonus, which means if you put in 50, they only match with 50. But if you put in 100, they'll match with the full 100. It's free money, folks. First of all, just take advantage of free money offers everywhere across the board that you can do these sorts of things. You should. It's just going to let you build a bankroll faster. You can net up to 10x your entry fee if you make a 5-player lineup that all hits. We're talking about basically player props, but you can do this across multiple sports. And if you've watched this show before, you'll know I've outlined quite a few different ridiculous things that you can make prize picks on, like lacrosse, highlight. We've got college football and NFL futures if you want it, Rocket League, tennis, soccer, KBO, WNBA first half lines. But we are going to take a quick look at some pitcher fantasy scores in the MLB. We're going to start it off right out of the gate. Let's go Zach Wheeler, over under 43.5.
Under.
I agree. I've got it well under. We'll go to my boy now, Alek Manoah, over under 37.5.
Under.
I agree. Let's see if we could race to the bottom. Let's go back to one last of my boys, even though I've walked this one back. Braxton Garrett, over under 24.5. I think it's on the number, basically.
Over.
There we go. First over to Braxton Garrett, as we expected. And then final one. Let's see. Carlos Carrasco, 37.5.
Under.
Yeah, I would take the under slightly.
Same trend that it seems like we've just been seeing for a while, where it's like the good pitchers, the guys you would play like in DFS on like a different site are like projected high, and then the guys that like you don't really want are under projected.
I know, it's just weird. Yes, Neil, that is FanDuel scoring. I don't think that we are on the same page that anybody's going to go, Shane Bieber's going to drop 42.5 DK points. But if Wheeler drops 43.5 DK points, you should play him today. But yeah, FanDuel scoring for pitchers, DraftKings scoring for hitters.
Yeah.
Can't you just look at the cheapest pictures against the toughest lineups and come up with your top stacks? Do you really need all the fancy math to tell you that? Well, the cheapest, yes, you do.
Yeah, it certainly helps.
We agree with you. That's rich. That's rich.
I
Brewers
mean,
and Rays.
Like, do you need the math to tell you that like the Cardinals are the best or one of the best stacks? No. Do you need the math to tell you how often they're likely to be there and how often you should be playing them? Yeah. That's kind of how the game works.
Well, not to mention, like, just because Tyler Alexander is 5K, or like even James Caprillion is 5,600, that doesn't make the opposite side of that game a good stack.
Well,
just
he also said against the toughest lineups. Like, yes,
fair.
You can just look and know that you're normally going to be able to just look and say, this is one of the most likely offenses to succeed, as long as you have some sort of basic understanding of what a good offense is and who bad pitchers are. But
we could also do that by like looking at the implied run totals from top to bottom. That's going to do the exact same thing.
Man, Chad is just having player histories between pitchers, batters alone is huge. Literally does not matter.
I've never looked at it once.
I did like 6 years ago when I was first learning DFS and sucked at it.
That is the most important thing to not have. It's one of those mornings. Apparently everybody's on drugs. I wish I could have joined them. If you're on drugs, hit the like button. We're only at 62. Brewers and Rays. Freddie Peralta going for the Brewers. Ryan Yarbrough looking like the long man for the Rays. No ownership going to, well, I don't believe Peralta is in our ownership projections right now, and Yarbrough as the long man, I'm sure, isn't either.
Yarbrough, I thought was.
Maybe he is. We're not playing Ryan Yarbrough today either way.
Yeah, never mind. I was looking at something else.
Here's the question. How deep do you think Freddie Peralta can go in this game?
75, 80.
Okay. Somewhere in that like 4 to 5 innings range.
Yeah, I mean, he threw 67 last start, said he felt fine. Didn't make it through the fourth, went 3 2/3.
Can you roster him today?
I think it's tough on this particular slate because you're not getting a salary discount. He's still 9,900. Yeah. And it just turns into, yeah, he has good strikeout stuff. He's got a 29% strikeout percentage. But Ohtani and Cole are $400 or $500 more expensive than him, not on any sort of pitch restriction and with better strikeout percentages. Bieber's less expensive, not on any sort of pitch count, and still really good in facing the Tigers. It's just really difficult, I think, on this particular slate, knowing that his upside is at least somewhat capped because he can only do so much in what we're assuming is going to be 75 to 80 pitches.
Yeah, I got 3 guys ahead of him in salary over 20 fantasy points. I got 2 guys directly below him that are over 20 fantasy points. I don't know how to justify it unless he's got a full spectrum to be able to do today. And we're not going to Ryan Yarbrough, right?
Agreed.
Are we going to the bats here? Because I think we need to talk about the Brewers, who are 20th in ownership. They are unowned, and they are 9th in our top stack tool. Do you want to target Brewers bats here against whatever is going to be on the hill for Tampa?
Not really. I mean, Yarbrough, I think, is a decent enough pitcher. 4.5 implied run total for Milwaukee's fine. Yarbrough so far this year, 214 expected ISO to righties is a little higher than normal. There is some right-handed power with Adames and Renfroe in particular, but they're also both 5K plus. So I think it's kind of just on a slate of this size, I'll probably have trouble getting to Milwaukee, given that they're not particularly inexpensive, and there's just going to be other guys that I would rather get to.
Expected a little bit more ownership, but like turning everybody into 2% doesn't really make a difference either. So what about the Rays side? Any interest in going up against Peralta as he's working his way back?
No, not on this slate. Even Brandon Lau's price tag has finally come up. He kind of had been the free square at second base for a while. The rest of the team is cheap, but 3.5 implied run total, good pitcher in Peralta, solid arms behind him in the bullpen. I think it's a pretty difficult sell on a slate of this size.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. So this is sort of just a nothing game. This is like one of the first where we don't really have either a pitching piece or a relevant hitting piece. We're kind of just drawing a line through it.
Yeah, I think this game in general is one of the least appealing we've talked about so far, at least in terms of like what I actually expect to get to. If you want to just sit here and say like, oh, Willy Adames or Hunter Renfroe might could hit a home run, sure. But I can also name a bunch of other shortstops and outfielders that I like, and it's just going to be, I think, difficult to get to this game.
Are you ready to talk cores?
Yep.
Rockies and Cardinals. 4.9 run implied total for the Rockies, 6.2 for the Cardinals. Ryan Feltner, hardly newer. Miles Michaelis going in this one. No ownership coming to these guys. We're not rostering pitching, right?
No, I mean, Feltner against the Cardinals, I think it pretty clearly not something you're going to get to. 8 starts this year, 9 total games, 20.8% strikeout percentage. 3.84 xFIP is fine, but I mean, you're still talking about facing the Cardinals in cores. On the other side, Michaelis is a decent enough pitcher, but still pitching in cores and on a slate where you just are not short on pitching at all.
Let's start with the Cardinals. 18% odds of being the top stack. While I have it slightly lower than that, it's also very clearly the number one stack, and it's not close. They are number one in ownership at 20-something%. What do we do here? Because I think the answer might still be play them pretty aggressively.
Yeah, I mean, the way it looks right now, at least, I think that is because, for one, we have them basically twice as likely as any other team to be the top stack. 22% 23% aggregate ownership is certainly a lot, but also a 6% chance of being the top value. So when you compare them to these other teams that we've really liked, like Atlanta, the Mets, Toronto, you're just gonna be able to build better lineups around the Cardinals as well. So it kind of goes both ways where, like, it's a 14 game slate. So getting to the popular offense isn't typically that appealing. But on the other hand, the ownership's going to be a little bit more in check. Like if this were an 8 game slate, you would be talking about more, 30 to 40% on Cardinals hitters as opposed to guys being around 20%. When you get them around 20%, it just becomes a little bit easier to differentiate. I do think like this is a team where I would love to be pairing Charlie Morton with them, for example, as one way to get different. You can pair them with some lower owned secondary stacks, but I do think they look really good. It's early in the day. I don't know if how much I'll end up getting to, or if it'll be 5-mans versus like 3-mans. But I think the way things look right now, I would still be getting to the Cardinals.
I think we're in the same page here. I don't know how you don't. Like they are on such a different planet than everybody else. Do you have the top stack tool in front of you right now?
Yeah.
What's the gap between 1 and 2?
17.8% for the Cardinals, 9.9 for Atlanta.
I have it at 14 and 7. So basically the same like relative gap.
Right.
We're not all that different. I mean, we're talking about twice as likely as the second best possible team today.
Right. Like basically we have St. Louis twice as likely as Atlanta to succeed and getting twice the ownership of Atlanta.
It's just, to me, impossible to get away from. Because we've got guys like, Newt Bar at 2,300. I don't care what. Yadier Molina might be 400 years old. He's 2,200 in cores. Like these prices again are just broken.
Yeah, and especially when you compare them to the other teams. I'm not saying that I don't like Atlanta or I don't like the Mets or anything, but you just have $5,900 Alonso or whatever it was, and $5,300 Riley, $5,100 Acuna. Those guys are underpriced, Acuna and Riley in particular, but they're still relatively expensive when you have the entire Cardinals team outside of O'Neill, Arenado, and Goldschmidt below 5K in a good spot in cores. It just means that, especially on a slate with the pitching that this one has, you're just going to get such a big gap in terms of projection between a lot of your Cardinals lineups and whatever else you're playing, that even once you're accounting for ownership and stuff like that, it's probably not going to be enough to get you away from the Cardinals.
There shouldn't be a scenario where we're on a 14-game slate. The top stack is twice as likely to be the top stack as the team that's in second, and they're still 6th in top value. Like the Cardinals pricing should not allow them to be 6th in value in cores.
Right. It just doesn't make sense.
No. So play the hell out of the Cardinals. Cash game, probably at least 4, if not 5.
I would think so, yeah.
Especially
I would think like Gorman at 4,400, I would fully expect to be the cash game second baseman. Newt Bar at 2,300, I would fully expect to be in lineups. Carlson at 4,300, probably. And then
you're certainly not wrong with Goldschmidt or Arenado.
And then if you get to more of the rest, then cool.
Yeah. Do the Rockies look good to you? They are 5th in our top stack tool, 9th in ownership. Is this a spot? Are they getting slept on here?
I don't really think so, because they just don't offer anywhere near the same level of value. We have them 5th in top stack percentage at about 5%. So 1/3 to 1/4 of St. Louis, but also only a 1.8% chance of being the top value. So you're getting a better pitcher in Michaelis. Obviously going into cores is still a tough spot for him, but he's just really not a bad pitcher. Typically does a good job limiting power. 160 expected ISO to righties, 119 to lefties. And then you're also not paying a full premium on Colorado, but like Blackman at 5K, Rogers at 5,200, Cron's only 4,300 for some reason, but it's just not as cheap an offense. So, do I think they're a bad stack or something? No, but I think that you're just not going to build the same level of lineup around them as you would some other teams, or as you would the Cardinals in particular. And then when you are paying up, I do just like getting to teams like the Braves and the Mets a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't get the sense I'm going to have a lot of Colorado, which I don't really care too much about. If they were slightly better in real life, just in general, it would be a different story, but they still look like shit. So go Cardinals. Go Cardinals. Then we get the opposite game. 2.8 run implied total for the A's, 3.8 for the Angels. That is, I mean, you could add those together and get dangerously close to the Cardinals total for today.
Yeah.
James Caprillion and Shohei Ohtani. Ohtani, 10,300. He's the third most expensive pitcher on today's slate, going up against the A's in Oakland. Great park, crappy team. I think Ohtani is the best pay up option today.
Yeah, give me as much as I can get to. You know, he's getting the most ownership of the group. You have him at 34%, Wheeler at 22, Cole at 24, but Ohtani 25% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on DraftKings compared to 20% for Wheeler and Cole. So he should be the highest owned in that group. He's got a very good matchup against Oakland. He has the highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 35.9%. 2.29 xFIP is just insanely good. 5.7% walk percentage. There's nothing really negative to say about Ohtani. Like, it's baseball. Could he have a poor start? Sure. He's 75% not to be a top 2 pitcher on this slate, but you know, there's just nothing that makes me want to not play him here.
Yeah, I'm with you. He's the guy that's popping up the most for me. I appreciate getting the extra $100 on Wheeler or $200 on Cole, but really what I want to get is the Oakland A's in Oakland. That is what makes it a lot easier for me. I will say, though, I do like James Caprillion on the opposite side here, 5,600. If I'm paying down, this is probably the guy that I want.
Yeah, I mean, like is a very strong word to use. Of the pitchers listed as probable starters right now on FanGraphs, Caprillion has the lowest strikeout percentage at 15.7%. He has a 5.2 xFIP. He's walking nearly 10% of hitters, 1.4 home runs allowed per 9 innings. The guy is bad, but he's 5,600. He's facing an Angels team that just strikes out freely. So I do understand if you just want to, you know, kind of punt the position. He's not getting a lot of ownership, so it does offset your costs a little bit as well. It would let you, like, if you're going to him with the Cardinals, for example, it's going to let you get Arenado, Goldschmidt, and a low-owned pitcher, and then you just have to pray that he pitches like a major league pitcher.
Yeah. I mean, he ain't good.
Yeah,
but
he is not good.
The combination of the matchup, the heavy strikeout rate, like if anybody's going to make you strike out guys a little bit more frequently, it's the Angels. It's not a very good lineup outside of Ohtani in the grand scheme of things, but I might have a little bit of Caprillion. I don't like it, though. It's not fun.
So you like Caprillion more than the guy that I didn't, Tommy Henry?
Tommy Henry? I do. We'll cross that bridge shortly. But we're certainly not rostering either one of these teams from a hitting perspective, right?
I don't think so, especially because you can't even play Ohtani.
Right. So,
I mean, Jared Walsh at 3,100, I think is a pretty good value, but I mean, the park still sucks, and yeah.
All righty. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, okay. Final read, guys. First and foremost, hit that like button. We're at 80 likes. I think that we should be able to get to 100, so we'll need 20 more. That would be helpful. And then we're just going to talk easy promo code for you guys. MLB Strategy Show, one big word, all caps, smush it all together. That will get you 50% off your first week of Stokastic plus Platinum. I personally think this is a fantastic week to take advantage of that. We've got, obviously, MLB every single day. We've got PGA, massive PGA event that, while it isn't a major, is still very important. We've got racing. We've got MMA, probably like League of Legends or some other esports that I don't know off the top of my head. Lots of stuff going on over the next 7 days. I think today would be a perfect day for you guys to sign up. So again, MLB Strategy Show, one big word, 50% off your first week of Stokastic plus Platinum. Diamondbacks and Pirates. 4.7 run implied total for the Diamondbacks, 3.9 for the Pirates. Tommy Henry and Zach Thompson going in this one. Henry, 7% owned. Thompson, no ownership. If I'm going to someone that isn't James Caprillion at the bottom, it is Tommy Henry in this spot against the Pirates. Talk to me about Henry.
He's better than the Pirates, I guess. Like, he's not necessarily a great pitcher. He had a 5.17 xFIP at AAA this year in 108 innings pitched over 20 starts, but he did strike out 21.9% of hitters. Zips has him with a 21.6% strikeout percentage going forward. The bat has him at 17.4%, but you have to keep in mind that the bat just hates any person who has played minor league baseball within the last year or two. So typically those projections are going to skew low. But you're getting a good matchup against the Pirates. He is fully stretched out. As I mentioned, 108 innings pitched in 20 starts. He went 5 innings in his first start with Arizona. So again, this isn't a pitcher that I have any level of confidence in his ability to be a good major league pitcher, but he is 5,400. He is facing the Pirates. They have a 3.8 implied run total. He's probably not a less talented pitcher than James Kaprielian.
Oh, what an honor. He's probably not as bad as the guy with the lowest strikeout rate.
Right.
That's great. We can skip Zach Thompson, that's for sure. I guess we can't skip the Diamondbacks, though. 7th in our top stack tool, 5th in aggregate ownership. I faded them yesterday, and if they're 5th in ownership today, it's probably happening again.
Yeah, I didn't get to them much yesterday, I don't think. Maybe I did. I don't even remember. I don't think I did. But yeah, like it's an okay spot against Thompson, but there's just so many good offenses on the slate. And then the other thing is, again, it's just how much St. Louis's pricing is breaking things. Like Arizona looks like a decent stack from a value standpoint when you have $3,500 Alec Thomas and $3,700 Christian Walker and $3K Jake McCarthy, $2K flat Seth Beer. They have a 4% chance of being the top value stack compared to 6% for the Cardinals. And the Cardinals are 5 to 6 times as likely to be the top scoring stack. It just makes it really difficult, especially when there is ownership coming in here. If you were talking about, 30% Arizona ownership instead of 20, and 2% Arizona ownership instead of 5 or 6, it would be a little bit different. But right now, at least, it kind of just looks like even though the Cardinals are popular, they relatively they're getting like less ownership relatively than other teams are, like Arizona.
Totally agree.
Do you understand like what I'm trying to say? Like
I do totally agree with you. Like, even if the Cardinals are mildly overowned in course, relatively speaking, it's not as bad as how overowned the Diamondbacks currently are, even at 6%.
Right. Like the Cardinals are projected for 3.5 times the ownership the Diamondbacks are getting, and they have like a 4.5 times the chance of being the top scoring stack.
And let's not forget, and I think it's a very important piece here, that if we're just going based on the Cardinals, I'm just going to use the Cardinals as the reference point. They are, where is it in our top stack? 18% to be the top stack. They're also like 35% to be top 2 or something in that neighborhood, like 40 something to be top 3 or top 4, which most of those outcomes are going to still play pretty well for you on a 14-game slate. Like, obviously you would like to be first, but we're probably going to have like 2 or 3 teams that are at like 110, 115 total points. Another one that's at like, 108. Another one that's at like 101. Having those other spots is still very reasonable. Whereas when you add up all of the numbers for the Diamondbacks, it's like, okay, they got to like a 10% chance of being a top 3 stack.
And that's where the value component comes in so much as well. Like that's why it's really difficult to look at when it's for me, typically when the team with the highest top stack percentage is getting a lot of ownership, but also one of the best values, it ends up just being really difficult for me to get away from them because like you were saying, it's not just about them being the number 1 stack, especially when they are offering value, because then it goes back to, okay, well, let's say they end up being the 4th highest scoring stack, but I'm able to get 2 of the top tier pitchers and 3 good one-offs with them, as opposed to if you were to play like the Rockies and they're the 4th best stack, the rest of your team is going to be cheaper players where, obviously they can still end up being the right pieces, but like it's just less likely. So that's why it just ends up, the value piece ends up being so big. And that is one thing that I always think is important to point out, because when we talk about the top stack tool, typically we're talking about it in terms of just top stack percentage versus ownership, but you do have to factor in the value as well. The pricing obviously is still really important.
Do we want to talk about the Pirates, who I must add our number 1 value stack for today?
I mean, Tommy Henry probably isn't good, so I guess that is worth mentioning. Like Brian Hayes, if he's in the lineup at 3,500, Michael Chavis at 2K flat, Those guys both look pretty good. Newman's only 3,100. Reynolds is only 4K. I guess you can sort of make the case for them. Like, I would get to them before I got to Cincinnati. I would get to them before I got to Detroit.
Okay. Oh, man. Wild slate today. This is going to be really tough. That 6 to 7 window. Like, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to end up with.
I'm going to run a dummy crunch, I think, probably not long after the show, just because I'm curious what ends up happening.
Padres and Giants. Ooh, go ahead.
I was going to say, although I don't know if we have all the random pitchers projected yet. So
yeah, it might. This is definitely one of those days where like you start your crunch at 6:30 because there's 14 teams and it takes a while to run. And at 7 o'clock, you're just like, what are we going to get here?
Right.
Like scratching off lottery tickets. Padres and Giants, 4.1 run implied total for the Pods, 3.1 for the Giants. Joe Musgrove and Alex Cobb. No ownership going to Cobb. Musgrove at 10%, 9,600. I don't love the idea of targeting against the Giants, but I think Musgrove might be going a little bit underrepresented here. I like the salary. The park's great. The Giants are good, not great. I like Musgrove here.
Yeah, I think it's a situation where he doesn't project as well as Bieber in that price range, and then obviously he's not going to project as well as Ohtani, Wheeler, Cole. But if you just kind of do like a 1-versus-1 comparison, he isn't getting as much ownership as he probably should. 11.5% chance of being a top 2 pitcher compared to 14% for Bieber, but Bieber's getting 2.5 times the ownership. So it's just another spot where, you know, like, again, if you're getting to the Cardinals, for example, maybe you just end up playing a little bit more Musgrove than Bieber. And that's one way that you offset some ownership in those individual lineups. So, you know, if I have a lineup where I have a low owned team, I don't really care about ownership, I would get to Shane Bieber before I get to Musgrove. But I do think Musgrove can be a useful piece in your more popular lineups. He has a 25% strikeout percentage, 3.32 xFIP. Like you said, the Giants aren't bad, but they're not great. And I think in tournaments, Musgrove can be a pretty useful piece in your more popular lineups.
I got to a little bit north of that 10% mark for the field. I like the way that feels. You mentioned Bieber before. I really like Bieber at 9,400. So, and I do think Bieber is a better option than Musgrove. But Musgrove feels like he's just going to get completely like overlooked. You know, 24% to Cole, 21% to Wheeler, 30 whatever to Ohtani, 24% to Bieber. Like Musgrove is not that big of a step away from all of those guys, and he is just going to like eventually you just run out of different guys to put in your lineup, and it appears that he is 5th out of that group, and I think that's really interesting for large field GPP 150 max type constructions.
Yep, agreed.
There's no bats in this game, though, are there?
Not really. I mean, people are talking about it in chat right now that, like, I think the Padres are a team that if you just play them every day, regardless of matchup and everything, you probably end up getting there, you know, having a good night or two before the season ends. Alex Cobb is a good pitcher. 2.81 xFIP is extremely good. 24.9% strikeout percentage. I'm never going to talk people off of playing a team that has Juan Soto, Manny Machado, Josh Bell, Jake Cronenworth, and Brandon Drury hitting consecutively, but it's also not a very appealing matchup here, and they're not exactly cheap.
Yeah, I'm never mad when those guys show up, but I just don't think they're going to show up.
Yeah,
and we're definitely not getting to the Giants.
Yeah, I'm not getting to the Giants. I will say Cobb too at 7K. Like he's another one where if he just ends up in some lineups, that's fine. But certainly doesn't project particularly well.
No. Mariners and Yankees. Luis Castillo and Garrett Cole going in this one. 3.3 run implied total for Seattle, 3.7 for the Yankees. Castillo, 10% owned. Garrett Cole, 24% owned. I guess start with Cole since he's pulling more ownership. 10.5, most expensive pitcher on the slate. Sort of sneaky, like easy to get away from, but at the same time, he's still Garrett Cole and could very easily be the highest scoring pitcher on the slate.
Yeah, I think the ownership for him makes sense. You know, he's coming in behind Ohtani. He's getting a little bit more than Zach Wheeler, which I think is kind of just splitting hairs there. He has the second highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 32.4%, 2.71 xFIP. And I mean, the strikeout stuff is just so good. Like you even kind of saw, I hate talking about floors in baseball because they kind of don't exist, but even in that, I think it was his last start against Seattle in Yankee Stadium where he gave up like 6 earned runs in the first inning and still ended up getting you 12, 13, 14 DraftKings points. You know, like clearly if you go in, if you tell me right now, Garrett Cole scoring 14 points, I'm not playing him in a single lineup. But at the same time, you know, like you can still compete in tournaments if you get 14 from Cole, if, you know, your bats do exceptionally well. And that's it, it just kind of reiterates like strikeouts are what really drives floor in DFS. More so even than like, oh, this guy is a good matchup. Because if you don't have the ability to get back runs with strikeouts, it's really hard for you to overcome bad luck or a bad inning, where somebody like Cole, can just go -10 in the first and still get you a serviceable game.
What about Castillo on the opposite side? Is the problem here just 10% ownership is honestly a little surprising to me, given the fact that the Yankees are on the opposite side. This is part of the reason why I like Alek Manoah.
Yeah, I do think this might come down a little bit. I know yesterday we had Gilbert projected around 11% ownership. He came in at 4 or 5 against the Yankees. And yeah, like this is the one where, on the one hand, I do think Castillo makes some sense in tournaments. Like everything we just said about Joe Musgrove, I think can be applied to Luis Castillo. And, it's just a worse matchup against the Yankees. But from an upside standpoint, it's still a good park to pitch in. It's still a pitcher that has very, very good strikeout stuff. Matt Carpenter is hurt, so that lineup gets a little bit weaker, especially if Rizzo ends up not playing. So I think, Castillo's a high upside guy you can use to offset ownership. But if he's really going to be 10%, why aren't I just playing like Manoah against the Orioles or Morton against the Red Sox? Because it's not like either of those spots are any riskier than taking Castillo against the Yankees. And it's not like Castillo is a much different pitcher than either of them.
Right. It's a really weird thing to see where like he's getting the ownership and I sort of get it. And then I see like one or two other guys that should. And that's where I start to see like my differences. If Castillo is going to get 9% today, like I'm just not, if he's in that area, I'm just not going to end up with him because somebody else in this area is going to have 0. And that's what we're getting right now out of, at least in this case, Manoah.
Right. Like my guess is that we end up, so like right now we're projecting, let's call it 20% aggregate ownership to Castillo, Musgrove, Morton. Or sorry, Castillo, Musgrove, Morton, and Manoah, with Castillo and Musgrove pulling, 10% apiece, and then the other two getting none. I wouldn't be surprised if you kind of see Musgrove maybe stay in that like 8 to 10% range, but then Castillo come down to like 5%, and the other two come up to 5%.
I think that makes some sense. Obviously, we're happy to get a few of these Yankees bats. We're not going to be getting. Is Donaldson that broke his foot yesterday, or no? Who broke their foot? Carpenter.
Carpenter broke his foot. Yeah.
Okay. So we're not going to have Carpenter today. I'm not going to be rostering either side of this game from a hitting perspective, but there are obviously bats that transcend matchups.
Yeah, exactly. It's, kind of like we talked about with Houston. There's nothing that I can point to, with Martin Perez and say like, oh, this is where you really want to be. Like he really struggles here. Same thing with Castillo. He's gotten much better at limiting power in general. And then now he's going from, pitching his home games in Cincinnati to Seattle. 142 expected ISO to lefties, sub 100 to righties this year. There's nothing you can point to that says, oh, the Yankees are likely to have success here. But when the Yankees have success, it just looks different than when other teams have success because they have so many guys that hit home runs. So there's still just, that massive upside that comes with the Yankees, but only a 3.7 implied run total, extremely low for them. 2% chance of being the top stacked, projected for less than 1% ownership because they're also expensive. I like the idea of the Yankees. I kind of doubt that I get too much.
And then we close it out. Dodgers and Twins, 5-run implied total for the Dodgers, 3.6 for the Twins. Julio Urias or however the hell you're supposed to say it with like made up letters that I can't say, and Joe Ryan going for the Twins. No ownership going to Ryan. Urias at 8.5%. He's in the exact same boat right now as Luis Castillo, only a way better matchup. Like I like Urias more than I like Castillo.
I think they're pretty close. We have Castillo like 1.5 higher than Urias, which I think is fine. Just better strikeout stuff. What'd you say?
I have it the opposite way.
Okay. Better matchup for Urias, better strikeout stuff for Castillo, and still a tough matchup for Urias. 23.8% strikeout percentage for him, 26.1% for Castillo, 3.75 xFIP for Urias, 3.35 for Castillo. I think it's certainly one where like reasonable minds can differ on where you would prefer to get to. I think
they're very similar.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for both of them to be in that like, sub 10% range, but getting some ownership.
Yeah, I'm probably just counting I'm a little bit more scared of the Yankees than I am the Twins, and that's really the basis of all of it. Either way, those are two guys, if they are pulling 10% ownership, to me, they're the two easiest guys to like not roster. and just get to something else somewhere else.
Wait, what did you say?
If Castillo and Urias are the guys that are going to get like 10% ownership, to me, they're the easiest guys to just quickly get away from.
Yeah, like, well, yes and no. If they're going to get around 10% and you're talking about Morton and Manoah getting none, then yeah, just give me some Morton and Manoah. If, maybe Stroman's ownership and Urquidy's ownership comes down, so then Morton and Manoah are also pulling, 5 to 10%, then I don't have any sort of issue with Urias and Castillo being in that range.
Yeah, like I have Urias and Castillo projected ahead of Charlie Morton. I would get to them more if this ownership looked a little bit different.
Yeah, we have Morton at 17 DraftKings points. We have Urias at 17.9. We have Castillo at 19.7. Manoah at 16.3.
That whole area is just going to make or break me, because like I basically like shook those guys up and pulled them out of the hat in a different order.
Yeah,
and I don't have a great feel for it.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked a lot about like when you're like with my 150 lineups, a lot of slates end up being either me very, very concentrated on a couple of offenses and spread out at pitcher, or very, very concentrated on a couple of pitchers and spread out at offenses. The way this slate looks to me right now, I expect to be pretty concentrated on bats and then just mixing in like all of the good pitchers I can.
Yeah, every combination of all these dudes at the top. I don't have any interest really in the Twins bats. I would have no problem getting to the Dodgers bats 6th in our top stack tool, 12th in ownership. But at the same time, like Joe Ryan's not bad. I think there are just better spots than the Dodgers for today, but they're like a totally reasonable 5th to 8th best stack today.
Yeah, it's sort of like the Astros and the Yankees, except I do think the spot's a bit better for the Dodgers. Ryan has taken somewhat of a step back this year. 4.46 xFIP, 1.4 home runs allowed per 9. Still a 24% strikeout percentage, 178 expected ISO to lefties, 143 to righties, but also only striking out 17% of lefties compared to 30% of righties. Sets up pretty well for Freeman. Muncy's had his struggles this year, but he's also only 4,400. Bellinger's pretty cheap. And then a lot of the righties in this lineup are just so good that you don't really care about the matchup. So I think the Dodgers are one of those teams that they're always in that same boat with like the Yankees and the Astros, where I don't really care who's facing them. If they're not popular, they're a good tournament stack. I do think they look just a little bit better than those two teams given their respective matchups.
All right, let's do it. Favorite stacks?
Cardinals, Mets, Braves. I mean, it's chalky, but going down the list, I would say the Dodgers are in there.
Okay. Yeah, Cardinals for sure. I'm actually getting a little bit of the Cubs. I'm a little surprised. Really curious to see. Everything's going to change by the time I get to the deeper dive, that's for sure. But Cardinals number 1. Now the actual real question. Let's prioritize these pitchers.
Ohtani.
I agree.
Flip a coin between Cole and Wheeler. I mean, we have them projected less than 1/10 of a point apart.
I think 2 is Bieber for me.
Well, that's what I was going to say was that $1,000 in savings to get the Bieber though could actually make him number 2. Yeah, I really think like in some order 2, 3, 4 Cole, Wheeler, Bieber.
Yeah,
and then I think it's probably Carrasco because of the cheaper salary.
Sure. And then at that point, I'm just picking off these like low-owned guys, whether it's Musgrove, Castillo, Urias, Manoah, Morton, all very, very viable to me. I don't see me getting to that Stroman or Urquidy ownership at all.
Yep.
And then I'm probably going to have more James Caprillion than I want to. Hopefully something happens to make that stop happening.
Right.
Guys, hell of a slate here. 14 games. One of the most loaded pitching slates that I can remember in a long time. Adam and I are going to be back in a couple hours, breaking it all down again for the deeper dive. As we start to get more lineups, I think this will all become very interesting. So Adam will have GPP videos out in a little bit. Good luck to all of you tonight. Make sure you're coming to watch Deeper Dive and Live Before Lock, 4:45 all the way to 7. So good luck, everybody. Thanks. Peace.